Welcome, welcome. Dr. Stephen Hobbs here from the Wellth movement. This is Thursday Perspective for February the 25th, 2021. And I'm going to look at the 7 elements of listening. And the Thursday Perspectives are about tools and techniques, concepts and practices that are of use to you in living your great life, being for the world, as a 55+ year young grandparent or someone who supports grandparents, and that you're living from your legacy. You want to evolve your legacy. And therefore, these tools and techniques that I'm going to share with you are ones that you can carry on and use them in an everyday basis. But they're also very valuable when you want to interact with your grandchildren or children in a nature-based approach. So it's the 7 elements of listening today that we're going to go through. And before we jump into it, remember to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, comment, like, and share so that we can continue our conversation on an ongoing basis. So from that perspective, what I want to do is I just want to share a couple of ideas about listening before we jump into the 7 elements. Now, I know that it's probably something that we do on a given day and we just take it for granted. That's how I saw it years ago. And in some days, I still do that. Yet I took some time to learn about listening, to sort of get into the background of what's happening when we're listening. And what it did was actually gave me a really strengthened way for my communication. Because I believe in the following phrase: when you listen, you learn; where you share, you educate. Now, from this, when you listen, you learn, it is true. When you listen to what is going on around you, you learn. You are being influenced by others. And when you go to educate, then you are the one who is influencing. And from that perspective, I learned and really caught on to this, and I know you know this, but it's worth stating again. I got 2 ears and I got 1 mouth. Why don't we do a little bit more listening than sharing, and sharing stories, telling stories? Why not listen a little bit more to what's going on around you? Listen more to the conversations and see what's actually being said. I think you'll find it to be most interesting. Now, another aspect of listening I'd like to share is the following. Listening usually goes at the speed of what you see. Yes, often when we listen, it's based on what we see, not what we've actually heard. And therein, sometimes it gets us into a problem. Now, I appreciate body language as a form of communication. And when you pick up on someone's body language or something goes by you very quickly, you know, that whole sense of squirrel. You've got to really stay there with the communication, stay there in your listening if you truly want to benefit from listening with someone or listening into a group. Okay, so let's dive into the 7 elements of listening. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the main elements up here, and then a word just to remind you what it's about on this side. So to get us started, the key starting point, I believe, for listening is the notion of attending. That is attending to the sound so that what you can do is you can hear the sound. And you might take this for granted, but it's attending to the sound. If someone was to yell fire, you would attend to it very quickly and you would hear it if it's being shouted because it means something to you. But also, I've done this in a course that I offer around listening, where what I'll do is I'll start sharing and then I'll have a remote in my hand and I have some music that might be playing in the background, and I just keep increasing the volume of that sound, and see the expression on people's faces, and usually they get it pretty quickly, is that when there's a lot of noise around you, it's hard to attend to the most important news that is there available, to actually hear the news when it's shared with you. So that's the first element, is the attending and the notion of hearing it. The next one is around the idea of understanding. And what we're doing here is that we're attempting to figure out what is the meaning associated with what you are hearing. So I gave you that sense of fire. When you hear that word and it's yelled in an open room or close to people, then you understand the meaning of it fairly quickly. But sometimes when someone is attempting to share a new idea with you, a new concept, what might happen is you might not always understand all the words that are associated with the presentation. One of the tools and techniques that I use in the background of what I do is called hermeneutic phenomenology. And you're probably going, whoa, what did you say? Hermeneutic phenomenology. It's the background information that guides me in the creation of what I create. And I'm going to shoot a video about that and break it down at some point in time. But for purposes of illustration, I just wanted to, there was a word, and did you get the meaning of it? You may have heard it, right? And you don't really understand the meaning of it. So that's a way of looking at understanding and meaning. The next one I want to take a look at is comprehending. And what that is about your meaning of what you heard. Because there's times when someone might share into a room in a collaborative conversation, they may say something and one person picks out one meaning. Yeah, you both heard it, you've attended to it, you understand that there is a meaning, general meaning about it. However, the comprehending that I might pick up to what you pick up by someone sharing with us may be slightly different. And therefore, it's being aware of that and to continue the conversation so that we can make sure that we agree. There's one of the elements of listening that came to me in some conversations I was having when I was doing some consulting work. And it certainly played itself out when I was interacting with youth, is that it's really important to make sure that you define the terms and you get agreement to those terms. Then you can make the map that goes with it and then use that map. And I'll go back to my days of canoeing. And from a safety point of view, is that there was one thing for them to hear me talk about safety and then understand the basic meaning. But to get them to comprehend what it meant to them was to do some back and forth questioning, getting them to share back what they heard about why are we tying up our life jackets? Why do you hold on to your paddle when you're canoeing if you tip over? Things like that. So it's from that sense that we've got the first three elements of listening. The next one we're going to go to is the idea of reflecting. And what you're doing here is reflecting in and on what is being said so that you can get some sense of agreement. And that would be in the sense of a common agreement, not only for yourself, but if you're having a conversation with someone, that what you have attended to and heard and the meaning you've given to it, that when you reflect on it and you share it back through the conversation, there is a sense of agreement. But also you might actually hear something, I don't agree with that. And this is sometimes where if someone is sharing bad gossip with you, you might go, I'm not going to listen to that. This is no way is this of value to me. And you have to then deal with it. Now, some people might walk away. You might say, okay, I need to clarify where you're going with this bad gossip. These are the elements of from an agreement point of view. The next one I want to look at is the idea of remembering. Because if I am reflecting, I've comprehended, I've reflected, and I'm going to remember, I'm going to do something with it, it's the notion of the storage. In other words, where are you going to store it so that you might be able to pick it up again? We have this short-term memory where we can hold just so much. And then what we have to do is figure out, well, what do I do with it when I've heard it and I've given it meaning, I've reflected on it, it's a value to me. What am I going to do with it? Sometimes we write notes to ourselves. Other times we might make a note on our phones to remember it so that we can come to some sense of, oh, it's a value, I can use it again. The next one that you can get into is the notion of the responding. Because from the responding point of view, you're saying, okay, if I'm in communication, what is my response? What is the action that I'm going to take in correspondence with what it is that I've just heard? I understand, I'm comprehending, I'm reflecting on its value, or I'm going to want to remember it. How am I going to actually respond to that request? And this is one where I would really get you to really pay attention in the conversations you're having in the days to come, is really pay attention to this, yes. However, really look at what response is required based on your listening. Sometimes what we do is that we jump back in with some kind of response that isn't necessarily tied to the conversation that we're having. Because what's taken place is you've gone a little bit off to the side, maybe down a rabbit hole, and swung back again, and you are responding maybe in an inappropriate way. Sometimes this is where when someone says something to you, you've heard it, the meaning, but it isn't the meaning that was intended, and emotions come out. It's from that perspective, just really look at your listening and just reflect on it and remember the best practices, what I actually prefer to call the wise practices of listening. And the last one that I wanted to share with you is the sense of observing. And I've just hinted at it right now because from next time you go to have a conversation with that person, what did you observe about your listening, their listening, and how might you be able to support it and to grow the listening that's available to you? Also, this observing is to really take a look from the inside out. Is that how am I listening? What tools and techniques am I using from the inside out that I can use to strengthen my listening? And it really pays particular attention for those of you who are grandparents and going, okay, today I'm going over to share some time with the grandchildren. So you've got to, in a way, shift the way in which you're listening. If you've been spending the morning with adults and in the afternoon you're going to go over and interact with the grandchildren, you're going to have to look at, pay attention to, remember to shift your listening a little bit. And that carries on in all aspects of our listening, is that sometimes the situation gets us to look at listening in different ways. And that's why when people put like adjectives in front of or the type of or define the type of listening, where I'm getting at is some people might say active listening or collaborative listening. I believe that what we've got to do is really go into what is the base of listening and then applying that listening so that I'm going to be active in my approach, in my response. I'm going to be collaborative in my response. So I might be active and not collaborative. I might be competitive. I might be less than cooperative, because that's what's necessary from where I'm listening from. But other times you're going, okay, Well, I don't want to avoid something here. Therefore, I'm going to, because of my listening, get engaged in the conversation. So what I'm hoping is that by observing this, which is why it's like the top of the 7, and the 6 other elements that go with it are so important for you when you go to use your listening, to engage in, to show the action of listening with others. And each one of them has tools and techniques that you can use. So I gave the sense of attending. If you don't hear very well, then maybe you might need a hearing aid. And if you are only have hearing in sort of one side and not so much the other, again, you have to adjust accordingly. I have to pay attention to that at the moment because I've noticed my own hearing starting to weaken on one side. So I have to pay attention to that. The understanding the meaning is that obviously, if you don't understand what the word means, like hermeneutic phenomenology, then you're going to have to ask that person, what does it mean? So that what you can do is comprehend, okay, I get the meaning of it. If not, I may have to do a little bit more conversation just to make sure that I get the meaning that's of value to us at that point in time. And the next thing is reflecting, is actually, in a sense, sort of stepping back and looking at it from 2 perspectives. One is, well, if I'm in it and I'm listening, what does that say to me? And if I was to look on it, like to reflect on it, what does that say to me? So those are tools and techniques. The remembering part is, how do you remember things? Often I'll write more than I'll dictate something on my phone, but you'll also sometimes see me sort of, I'm going to down away from the conversation. I might be just touching my fingers. And what I'm doing is I'm attempting to remember the points that were just made. Now, if we're into a dialogue that's back and forth, and we're into working with these, and we're clear about what's going on, you don't need to worry about it. But sometimes I'm listening and I'm getting the points and going, okay, so I need to share this back, or oh, okay, let me add to that. There are tools and techniques like that that you can use. With the responding and the action, I think it's self-explanatory, is make sure that the action you're taking corresponds to the listening and what the person's asking of you, and not to confuse that up. And then obviously the observing, the tools is just look at the whole picture and see what's happening. How did you set up that time of listening? And what did you do as a debrief of that listening in case there was a bit of an emotional addition to that conversation? And in your listening, how is it that you might debrief it so that both of you might benefit from it? So there's quite a bit to this notion of listening. And I just highlighted the 7 elements that I interact with. And I know that there are times when I slip up a little bit on one of them or 2 of them, but generally, because of being with them for so long now, I've been able to support them and to get it so that listening is really one of my core competence that I share with people. And people are always amazed about how much I actually heard and what I'm able to share back. And part of that is I've developed what's called a visual language. And it's a way that I actually draw rather than write what I've heard. And I'll be talking more about visual language at another time. So with that, again, remember to subscribe, ring the bell, comment, like, and share. Would really appreciate interacting with you about the topic of listening and the 7 elements that are here. And again, I would remind you, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Do a little bit more listening than actually speaking out and sharing. I think you'll find it will really enhance relationships and also give you an opportunity to really develop your approach to listening as well. So with that, I think that I've covered off enough to give us a good start here around the topic of listening. So I wish you well. Take care.